Hello, my friends. Today, in my series of truth, transparency, and integrity, I am going to share with you becoming Rob Greenfield, the character, the online character, but really the human being. I'm going to share the integrity, some of the truth, the transparency around becoming me online. An online character, as some would say. And at the same time, I'm going to share about how I am really just a human being, and my struggles and my challenges and my early lackings in integrity as I became me, Rob Greenfield, and later back to my original name, Robin Greenfield. So I'm going to go back a little bit, but before I do that, I would like to say that if you haven't already, please watch the introduction to this truth series. This is a series diving deep into exploring truth, transparency, and integrity. It's a multi-part series exploring different areas of my life, the areas in which I have not lived up to my integrity, the areas in which I have not brought myself to the world as fully genuine and authentic, where I have not been fully truthful and honest. And right now I'm coming into full truth, full transparency in a lifelong quest to live in a very deep state of integrity. And my objective is to get to the point where there's just one me. I'm just me, Robin Greenfield. Whether you see me on camera or you see me in person, whether we're sharing a hug or whether, it's far off in the distance, I'm just me. So to give you the full picture and really to dive into this whole becoming Rob Greenfield online, the character, I'd like to go back a little bit to where my relationship with being online and sharing online started. And I have my computer here in order to be able to read off of some notes, so I make sure I capture everything, because it's really important to me that I share all the truth, all the transparency that I would like to. So to start, I've always been someone who's been writing and sharing messages. From a young age, I figured probably from about 1996, so from when I was about 10 years old, and through high school, when I graduated in 2005, I mostly did that through journaling. It was in 2005 that I started a blog spot, and then I started writing publicly. Some of it was travel, I would say largely for myself and for family in those earlier days. 2005 is when I got a Facebook account, just before starting college. It was back when you needed to have a university email in order to be on there. It was long before it's anything like it is today. So I was in Facebook way back at the beginning. So my first many years of Facebook were not a matter of sharing messages. It was just a college student using it for socialization. After I graduated in 2009, I went out on a world trip, and I started a blog for that on Shutterfly. And that was a world trip for about 5 months. And I was sharing my adventure of traveling around the world. And that was my first really, I would say, more public sharing. And when some people started to, follow my adventure. And during that time, I was using my Facebook profile and sharing some things through there. And a lot of people at that time back in college would be seeing the adventures I was on, because they were pretty wild for most of my peers at that time. It was only a few years later, in I would say 2013-ish, when I actually started to use the Facebook profile to share messages. And it was 2013 that I got YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, but I wasn't very active on those. It was mostly Facebook. So 2013 is really where it all begins, but I wanted to give you that little bit of a backstory. And 2013 is when I was running a marketing company at the time, living in San Diego, and I was waking up to the reality of what was going on in the world and wanting to step away from the whole monetary system and start doing something much more meaningful with my life. I decided that I was going to be a professional adventurer. and shortly thereafter leave behind my profession as a salesperson, as a business person. I chose to be an adventurer because I wanted to reach the masses. I had learned that there was so many problems going on in the world. The way we were living was part of such destruction, exploitation. We were just destroying the very home that we have. The people that I shared this home with were living in, such a level of exploitation and injustice to meet my basic needs as sort of a consumer at the time. And so I was realizing I wanted to live a life of truth. I wanted to live a life of justice, of equality or of equity. And I didn't want to meet my basic needs at the expense of others. And I wanted to show people that another way was possible, like I'd been learning. And I chose adventures because I wanted to reach the masses. So my early formula was to entertain, educate, and inspire. And the reason why entertain came first was because that's how I knew I could reach the most people with this message. First entertain, then bring in the education, and then inspire positive change. But there was another reason why entertain was such a big one, and that was because it's what I knew how to do. Since I was about 11 years old or about 5th grade, I had been an entertainer. I was the class clown of my high school. I was nominated class clown as my senior most. So I'd been entertaining people for a while, and part of my reason for entertaining is because it was my way of belonging, of being somebody, of being acknowledged, of having a purpose and meaning, of being loved, of being liked. And so I decided to use my sort of gift, my skill set of entertaining, and put that to use, and use my entertainment as a way to, again, reach people. I would say early on I had some core pillars. There was ego. There was me wanting to be somebody. There was wanting to have my place in the world. But at the core also was truth, was equality, was justice, was not destroying this very earth that we live on. And so my earlier days, it was always there, these core pillars. And again, though, one of those core pillars was ego. And I'm saying that because ego was one of the drivers that resulted in me becoming Rob Greenfield. If I didn't have such a large ego early on, I'm not sure that I would have been so driven. From the early get-go, my intention was to reach a whole lot of people. I started my website in 2013. It was actually Greenfield Adventures. And I chose Greenfield Adventures because I didn't necessarily want to center myself too much out of a place of ego and humility at the same time, I would say. And I made a goal early of wanting to have a TV show within 5 years. At the time, I was very influenced by that way of being. And I remember Bear Grylls was one of my early sort of models that I was learning from of how to reach a lot of people through adventures and bringing my own twist into it. So my first adventure was to bike across the United States on a bicycle made out of bamboo. It was called Off the Grid Across America at the time. And the idea was to cross the country and while having basically no negative environmental impact and living sustainability out to the extreme so that I could be reaching a whole lot of people and sharing this message. And so that was the first adventure in 2013. The adventure and my work caught on very quickly in a very organic way, just solely through authentically living out this experiment that I was on, this quest, this yearning to live sustainability to the extreme. I was so passionate and I was so dedicated, and a lot of people gravitated towards that, and there was a real, genuine, and authentic growth very early on, and I developed a following very, very early on. But there was a lot more going on behind the scenes that most people didn't see, and I want to share some of those with you. At the same time as I was really deepening into my adventures, I was really not wanting to run a marketing company anymore and not be making money. I was really dissolving my whole desire to be involved in the monetary system, knowing how destructive it was. Early on, we were selling advertising at grocery stores and hotels, but in 2014, I had a teammate and I asked him, what would you like to do? He was full-time working for me, and he came up with doing social media management and SEO, or search engine optimization. And so that's what our company became in about 2014. That's when I shifted from Greenfield Adventures to robgreenfield.tv. And the reason I had .tv was because .com was taken, but also Russell Brand had .tv at the time, and so I thought, okay, that kind of works. And I think also I thought it establishes some sort of TV thing, because again, my goal was to be on TV. So it was also, you know, ego played a role in that. So my teammate was working full-time doing search engine optimization and social media management, and we were taking on businesses that we that had a positive message or a product for the world. We were focused on trying to use our marketing in a positive manner. And so the other thing we were doing is we were using the marketing company to help me to get my message out there. So about half of his time, I would guess, went into sharing my message. So a fair bit of money was being used to spread my message. And so a lot of people, you know, were curious about that. Like, early on, did you have funds in order to be able to start to get yourself out there? And the answer was yes. I funneled a good amount of the money from the marketing company into spreading my messages. And I had a teammate who was spending, you know, I would say probably 20 plus hours per week doing that. So we put in a lot of time and energy. Now, some of the stuff we were doing was very of high integrity, and what I want to talk a little bit about was there's this concept of white hat SEO and black hat SEO. And from my recollection, white hat SEO is things that are legit. You're building up your search engine optimization, which is search engine optimization is search engine would be like Google. Optimization is people finding you on there, being in the first page or the first slot when you type something in, such as your name, like Rob Greenfield, or such as dumpster diving or sustainable living. So we were also doing black hat SEO, which is basically what you'd call cheating, like ways that you can get yourself ranked that you didn't actually earn. And so some of the things that I did early on that were not of high integrity that built me up, the first blog that was ever written about my bike trip in 2013 was a blog that I believe we paid $5 for on a website called Fiverr. We used Fiverr quite a bit to boost myself up, to start to get my message out there. We paid for backlinks, which backlinks help your SEO or your domain authority to increase. So we paid for backlinks. We actually paid for likes on the Facebook page. So when I first started a Facebook page, which might have been 2014, at first I was just using my profile, we actually paid for likes, which you could do. I don't know if you can still do that, but I believe it was on Fiverr. I think we bought like 20,000 likes to like launch off the Facebook page. We also paid for followers on Twitter. I believe it was about 20,000 or so followers, and that helped to establish a huge level of credibility, because back then 20,000 followers was a lot. Now, just as important to that is we actually paid for my verification on Twitter. Back then that was something you could do. I don't know if you can really do that today, but my Twitter profile verification, which is that blue check mark, was paid. And I believe we did that through Fiverr as well, if I recall. I'd like to mention that later we removed all those paid likes from Facebook. We removed all the paid followers on Twitter. And I think later, if I recall, the Twitter page was actually genuinely verified, but that was all things that we were doing early on. The other thing is that we also paid my first dumpster diving video. I think it was called Dumpster Diving Across America at the time. We paid for likes for that video. I think it was, views. I think it was 60,000 views. which at that time again was way more. You know, it was a different time back then. A lot has changed in the last decade. Now, the part that is something that I would have had the hardest time admitting to, or would never have admitted to early on, and that would be a big hit to my ego, was that I actually paid for my Wikipedia profile to be created. It was also through the website called Fiverr, and I believe it was $50. And so, to put it simply, I paid to have my Wikipedia profile created. And I'd like to share a little bit more complexity behind that. The thing is that in order to have a Wikipedia profile that's there and stays up, you have to fit the credibility to be able to qualify for a page. So in my case, it's a page as like a human being of notability. And so that required to have certain number of, or not necessarily a certain number of media outlets that verify who you are and your credibility in this field or what have you. But also they have to be primary articles from a certain stature of media. And so I had all that. So although I paid for the Wikipedia profile, the only reason it could be there is because I met the qualifications of what a profile would require. One small note that I'd like to make is I have a teammate who helps with updating the Wikipedia page. Like, for example, when I changed my name back to Robin from Rob. The whole idea of all of this was to build credibility both with people and with the media. And it did. It made an incredibly big difference. People took me so much more seriously, and especially as someone who is raising awareness about environmental issues and doing this in the mainstream, it really helped me to build my credibility with the mainstream media and be able to reach more people. So there was a genuine design behind all of this lack of truth and fallacies, but it was also, again, this whole ego thing. Like, I really wanted to be respected and to build myself up. And the other thing I do want to just acknowledge is that basically everything beyond that was real. It was just on the earlier place that I created some of this idea of credibility through paying for some of these things. But and they very much did set a foundation that helped me to build the future stuff that was from a place of integrity. And I'm not going to place any right or wrong, good or bad. I'm just putting the information out there. You get to decide what you think. I want to talk a little bit about my early strategy for building my social media, and that was that I spent a lot of time online. Not just my social media, but my website and my just whole online self. And many days I was on the computer for 12 hours. I remember my eyes hurting a lot at that time, and sometimes not even leaving the house, just morning till night. A part of that was a real drive to get a message out, and part of it was that sort of egomania, I would say, that I was going through. So one of my early ways of getting the message out and building my page was to post in a lot of Facebook groups. So I was posting in a lot of Facebook groups, sharing my message. I was constantly monitoring who was sharing my content, and I would create relationships that way. I would see which pages were sharing my content, and then I would message them and connect with them and build relationships. I would be commenting a lot when media was doing stories. I would comment in their feeds. I would just spend a lot of time sort of networking and putting myself out there, and I loved it. I was having a lot of fun. I was consistently sharing messages, and again, I was also just feeding into that really strong desire to be somebody, and largely operating from that place of ego. So one thing that I did early on where there was some stretch of integrity was I created relationships with a lot of these Facebook pages. At the time, it was like Expanded Consciousness, Valhalla Movement, Give a Shift About Nature, Sustainable Human, a lot of pages that were sharing really solid information and a lot that I was learning from. And so we had a relationship where I would share content onto my page of theirs. However, the challenging part was not all of their content was really in high integrity. And it didn't always have like full accuracy, and sometimes it was kind of clickbaity. And so one of the challenges was trying to only share their content that was really in alignment. And overall, I did a pretty solid job, but that was an area of integrity that I struggled with at times, and would I would say bend my integrity some because of wanting to continue that relationship and get my message out there. How I got media to cover me from the start was in 2013 when I was biking across the country. I would just roll up to the news stations and walk right in and say, hey, I'm biking across the country on a bamboo bicycle with the trailer covered in solar panels for sustainability, and I thought maybe you'd want to do a story. And it worked. Started in, I believe in Nebraska was maybe where I did the first media story. And as I traveled across the country, I got more media to cover my story, and larger media as I got to the East Coast, where there was larger population centers like New York City, for example. And we were also sending out press releases. We were contacting them on social media. And so that was, I would say, all in pretty high integrity, the way that I started to work with the media. But again, there was that bit of, or maybe more than a bit, of false credibility that they saw that helped them to be more apt to tell my story. For the years ahead, I continued my adventures, and after a couple years, I transitioned from considering myself a professional adventurer to an environmental activist. And my sort of strategy was that I was going to do a lot of these campaigns and set the foundation, show people what I was really all about, show my dedication, prove myself as a leader and as an activist and as a dedicated human being to humanity. So my early adventures included that first bike ride. In 2014, I biked across the country again, dumpster diving to create awareness about food waste, hosting the food waste fiascos in cities across the country. There was my traveling with no money through Central America, and showing that actually most people out there are good people. That was the message at the time. There was living in my tiny house in San Diego. There was getting my life down to 111 possessions. So living sustainability, living simply to the extreme. In 2016, there was my campaign where I lived like the average person for a month and had to wear all of the trash I created, and to create a visual of the truth behind how much waste is created from our consumerism. And what I'd like to share is that I was always doing that. Yes, there was the attention piece, but it was always genuine. It was always, whenever there would be attention on me, there would be attention on the earth. There would be attention on issues that are important, and there would be intention going into something beyond me. So my videos were getting, a lot of them, millions of views. My pages were growing by the thousands. By around 2016, my Facebook page was up to about 500,000 followers. I think 2016 is when that happened. That was about 3 years or so of making for that page. In 2015, the Greenfield group ended. That was the name of the marketing company, which meant not a whole lot more money being poured into things. So things changed at that time, and that's when I started Happy, Healthy, and Free, a nonprofit. Now that funded some of my videos, so just some transparency on, the money. There was still money that allowed me to build up this online presence. I started out filming my own videos on a 2016 iPod Touch, and those were videos that were getting millions of views, and we were working on a shoestring budget. I had a teammate, Daniel was a teammate for a while, he's over in Australia, and he was editing videos for $50 a piece. We were working on a very shoestring budget. I had started a Patreon account at that time, and I was absolutely loving what I was doing, and so much of it was in a very high place of integrity at that time. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this whole character. Rob Greenfield, the character. I've met enough people over the years, and they see me as this character. And there's a lot of people that are confused, like, am I real? In fact, one of the more commonly Googled questions I saw is Rob Greenfield or Robin Greenfield real? There's a lot of people who think I just stage all of it, living in the tiny house, foraging and growing and foraging all my food for a year. They think it's all one big thing to make money. I'll get to this, but I don't monetize my social media. I don't make a penny from my social media. I'm here to share messages. So that's absolutely not it. I am me. It's as simple as that. There is a character. I have created a character, but that character is me. And as I've done all of this, my thought has always been that I'm designing a character. I'm creating a story. I'm creating a narrative that people can follow. It's always been about creating these media packages that the mainstream media can easily package and share. So I've always looked at things through the lens of the media and through the lens of people, how they're going to perceive it. There's also the reality that I know that I'm living such a different life from so many people that it's just hard to believe, but I am indeed real. I am a real person behind in front of this camera, and I have met so many of you, so many of you know that. So all that to say, yes, there is a character, but this character is me. The taking things to the extreme is me. Being very outside of the box is me. The authenticness and the genuineness, it's me. It is all me. And me is an entertainer, and me is an activist, and me is someone who's just quite weird, you know, compared to a lot of people out there, who's just in many ways just kind of not normal. One area of that is that it's hard to be your most genuine self. Like, for example, I'm talking to a camera. I'm sitting here alone talking to you through a camera. That's going to be different from you know, being with a person in the physical realm. And so it is very hard to be the exact same person online as offline, because there's very real differences. When we're having a conversation, you're gonna have a different experience with me. When you meet me out on the streets and I'm really tired or I'm anxious, you're gonna have a different experience from the moments where I'm gonna film, which was when I'm probably having the most energy, although right now I don't have that much energy and I'm filming because it's just the time that I have. Now in 2014 I did my first TV show with Discovery Channel, and I share in depth about that in another video in this Truth series, so you can watch that to learn about the ways in which integrity, truth, and transparency were very much a struggle, and where I shined and where I didn't in that video. The thing that I want to mention right now, an area that I struggled with, you know, when I did the survival show and then when I did my traveling with no money, just the very idea of doing a show that wasn't so deeply focused on what was at the core of my being. And at that time, that would have been a series on food waste, for example, exploring the truth behind our food system versus free ride or via kerosene dinero. So that was a challenge, but overall, I think when it comes to reaching the masses, it's not really possible to live in full integrity, or it's possible, but you have to be really, really crafted. And I just that was the best that I had, I thought at the time. So there's a few things I want to share right now, which are just some different notes from the time. I want to mention just a note on using people, or that's not just a note, but I want to mention that. I know over time there's been a lot of times where I've been in, you know, colleagueships or relationships where the reason that I'm there is to get something, to get my message out there, not because I actually want to be with them, and not because I necessarily want to be working with them. And so that's something that I've certainly done over the years, which isn't in the highest integrity, which is, you know, using people for their platform. And it's a very common thing in this realm, and it's something that I've done, and you know, not something that I really do today, but it's something that I've certainly done my fair share of in the past. In 2016, I started to do a lot of videos on others, sharing their messages, and it was really successful. Millions and millions of views going into positive messages, uplifting people, organizations, and activists that are in alignment, and it was a really beautiful time. I did that for a few years, and It also helped to build my page a lot. And so the one thing I just want to acknowledge about that is just that there was a lot of, covering other people's work because I was trying to build my own pages. And so that's just an area where there wasn't full integrity. It's certainly at the time not something I ever would have wanted to vocalize, the truth behind that strategy. There was always the desire to be spreading people's messages just as I was, but there was that element behind it where integrity was lacking. One thing I want to share is that I never did clickbait. So many of the people around me, in my colleagues and the different pages that I was working, a lot of the content was very clickbaity. And something that I held my integrity to very strongly throughout this was never getting into the clickbait. Just titles that said what it truly was, not titles that didn't tell you what it was. And yeah, I do design titles that are designed to reach people, and I've certainly done that in the past, and I've had people help me sometimes with making my titles more likely to be something that people would view, but I've never gotten into the clickbait, and I'm glad to have been able to make it through this whole time without doing that, because there's certainly no way that I ever will now that I've made it this far. One reason that a lot of my colleagues did clickbait is because it was their job. They were making money. And so once money is involved, a lot of people were willing to cut more corners to make money. Maybe they needed to pay the rent, or maybe they just wanted more money. And that's one of the reasons that I've been able to live in such integrity online through social media, through my website, through YouTube, is because I don't monetize my content. I haven't monetized my content. I don't ever want to monetize my content. And that's really been one of the areas in which I've been able to hold strong in my integrity. One little note on that, I mentioned that I haven't monetized my YouTube, and I actually did work with a company called BBTV for a few years in order to work with them to help get my YouTube to be more successful. I did have to monetize, but if I recall, I monetized one video, and it was a video that gets like no views, so that technically I qualified for their program. But I've never monetized my videos, never monetized my social media. What I have done though, and I haven't made any money off of my social media. That's a commitment of mine. It's one of my vows to donate 100% of my media income from books, TVs, social media, etc. to nonprofits and other activists and organizations. They don't have to be a nonprofit. So what I have done though is I have had companies pay to be promoted on my social media, where that money went directly to nonprofits. Usually that was nonprofits that I admired and supported, that I wasn't actually a part of. And then once I started my own nonprofit in 2020, Regeneration, Equity, and Justice, money went to that nonprofit to fund some of my work. And I write about that extensively at robingreenfield.org/transparency. I have detailed every paid promotion that's ever been done on my social media, how much money it was and where it went to, which breaks the rules of some of the contracts, I'm sure, to share those details, but that's exactly what I've done. That also is where I've shared the details of the contracts with Discovery Channel, and anytime money was generated through my media appearances, TV, books, etc. All of that is detailed at robingreenfield.org/transparency. So transparency has been a practice of mine for a very long time, and I've been diving very deep, well beyond really any celebrities or people that I see in this realm. It's been very deep to me for a long time, and I'm so glad to be getting to go even deeper with you on these things right now. Now, one area that has been a struggle with those paid endorsements is keeping up the integrity of only doing paid promotions, not endorsements, paid promotions that are really in alignment. And there's been ones that just were not in alignment. For example, I did one for Acer laptops in 2022. I brought in $32,000, I believe, for the nonprofit from 2 partial days worth of work. And that helped me with planting so many fruit trees and giving out seed packs to thousands of people and supporting the team of people that I had working together to be able to do this work. Not a penny of it went to me, but it was a huge hit to my integrity because it was a greenwashing campaign to a large degree. Although there was some real truth behind it, there was a lot of greenwashing, and they used me. You know, I let them use me. And so that's one of the reasons that, to the best of my ability, I'm trying to minimize my involvement with money, because money is where it's challenging to stay in integrity. And what I want to do is I want to the best of my ability, work with individuals who want to work with me directly, because they want to sell something, but because they have funds and they want to use them to make a meaningful difference in the world. The nonprofit, Regeneration, Equity, and Justice, the nonprofit manages the website, video production, media, social media, etc. So that nonprofit funds some of my ability to get my message out there, and I cover more of that in my financial transparency, but just wanted to make a small note of that. So in closing, I want to share being on social media and being on Google and the whole internet thing has definitely been a consistent test of my integrity. The whole thing is set up really in a way that brings us out of integrity generally, and social media is really set up as a big ego trap, as a big ego driver to keep us on there. Now, a big test of my integrity is this blue check mark, the verified blue check mark, and then having 1 million followers on Facebook and 500,000 on YouTube and 200,000 or so on Instagram, all with these blue check marks. A lot of people look at me and they see, oh wow, he's something special. And of course I walk around with this feeling of being something special, a verified person with 1 million followers. I don't have $1 million. I've made a lifetime commitment to not being a millionaire, but everybody knows that I have 1 million followers, or not everybody, but it's there. So it's a big ego thing, and it's a challenging one, because ego, my belief is that if I'm driven from a place of ego, I'm not going to be of most effective service. I'm grateful to have these tests in my integrity. I'm grateful to exist online in a space that often lacks integrity in the relative place of integrity that I have. And one thing I want to share is the vows that I have that I've held strong to. Earning below the federal poverty threshold annually, maintaining a minimal net worth, donating 100% of my media earnings, practicing a very deep financial transparency, and distributing now all of my work under a Creative Commons license. So it has been a beautiful journey to be on, of practicing truth, integrity, and transparency online, and I'm excited to continue this journey with you. As I have deepened into this, I've been a little bit less effective online, as I would say. I'm putting less of my focus online and being more of just a human being out here in the world. So we will see what ends up happening with my online presence. I'm grateful for all the time that we have together, and I love you all very much.